I've been feeling pretty good about myself, and all good things must come to an end. Dubs, and I record myself, video and audio, reading aloud my own lewd fanfiction. Gold Experience had so much wasted potential. By Evilicious. Summary: An alternate universe where Giorno Giovanna accidentally knocked himself up. Notes: Geo Stan creates life, grows back limbs, cures cancer, rapes plot, etc. But I have yet to find any fan art / fanfiction where he uses his power to turn himself into a futanari. It shouldn't exist, but it needs... Does it really need to exist? So this is my contribution to the JoJo Sim basket. You're welcome. Back in the dark ages, when libraries still attracted vast populations and the internet's infinite supply of pornography wasn't nearly as accessible as it is today, Italian youth had very few options when it came to seeing that boom boom pow. Unlike many of his peers, Giorno Giovanna didn't have a hot older sister he could watch getting fucked by her boyfriend through the cracks in their bedroom door, or a slutty stepmom who diddled with different dicks while the sugar daddy was away. If his birth father had won the custody battle, Giorno would have had many opportunities to see his hot dad turning hot chicks into hot MILFs. But that didn't happen. He was born in Japan, sure, but he wasn't raised there, so the likelihood of his own mother coming on to him while her husband was out focusing on work was, well, not happening. Sex shops were for those legal age and up, and definitely not a place you wanted to get caught in, regardless. In short, the only way to see a naked woman was either by having sex, going to one of Italy's nude beaches, or by accident. Oh my fucking god. When he was 16 years old, Don Giovanna, newly appointed boss of Italy's underground, saw a woman's nipple for the first time. It was during a conference with the French mafia about trade or territory or something equally irrelevant to our tale. He'd shaken hands with their representative and, by pure accident, dropped his pen. The curvaceous, voluptuous, well-rounded woman bent over and picked it up, and that's when he saw the nipple, peeping out of her bustier like his dick popping up, oh my god, in his pants at the sight of it. It wasn't quite pink like his own nipples, but closer to a reddish purple. The paint swatch would probably be named something like Delicious Sin or Lust. He quickly forgot about the woman's face, but that nipple lives on in his memory. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he wakes up with a rock-hard one in his pants and his body covered in a cold sweat and has to remind himself that it's over. He's not there anymore. His life's already been changed forever, and that nipple is probably covered up by now. After the woman left, he ran like the fucking Flash to his probably stolen car, his dick guiding him like a compass that always points to pussy, and sat through an even more uncomfortable drive to the private villa during which Mista just laughed and drove 10 kilometers under the speed limit to get an erection out of him. What a prick. But as soon as the car parked, the young mafioso made a mad dash for his room, locked the door, and did what teenage boys do. He masturbated. Quickly. Desperately. Thoroughly. God, I hope my dad's not home. But, unlike most teenage boys, Giorno Giovanna had to stand with an entire wiki page's worth of bullshit abilities and plot hole fillers that made no fucking sense until at least 3 different people explained them on forums at his disposal, and a single wank wasn't enough for him. After several minutes spent hungrily handling his mothership to no avail, Giorno realized that a simple touch and go wasn't going to cut it for him anymore. Now that he knew the difference between a lewd female nipple and a school-friendly male one, he wanted to touch breasts. He wanted to feel the real deal instead of just the fake breasts, touching simulation he usually did by closing his eyes, sitting in a fetal position, and rubbing his kneecaps. Up until this point in his life, Giorno had assumed that women didn't have nipples. Or maybe they had a new and exciting type of nipple that he, being a poor teenager without Wi-Fi, hadn't the opportunity to see. So he'd been content just jerking off to his kneecaps. But Giorno was different now. Things had changed. He'd been enlightened, and plain old handle and dick masturbation techniques were not going to cut it for him anymore. Or it actually says, we're going to have to be foregone, but I kind of just ran with that sentence, I'm sorry. Like any good problem solver, Giorno Giovanna nodded over at his incredibly overpowered Stan, who dramatically nodded back before ripping off his user's pants and turning them into an alternative, edgier version of Jigglypuff that had menacing sound effects levitating in the air around it and sang only an incredibly high-quality version of Giorno's theme from the Vento Ario video game soundtrack on loop, and instead of making people fall asleep, it made everyone within a certain proximity feel a dangerous thrill, like their lives were on the line, except with more hype. Giorno would later name his creation Jigglypuff. Oh my god. It's spelled Gio instead of... Okay, I'm just gonna stop. The music was cranked. The door and windows were boarded up so that no sound could possibly escape the room. Gio's Gio was straight as the arrow. After mentally making this analogy, Giorno had Gold Experience turn his dick gold for an extra layer of badass. Hey, if the kid Stan can somehow dyes his hair and fucks up his bangs, it can give his penis a simple paint job. His Joe Johnson was only 8 inches long, so he GER'd that dick up. So it was infinite, but never ending. It's still an ending, so it only wound up being a solid 21 centimeters. 2 hours later, the mood was finally set, and Giorno was ready to wrangle his wanker. A single touch with Gold Experience, and the 2 signature ladybug brooches he had adorning his nipples fused with the nipples and became a pair of enormous breasts jutting out of his chest like 2 cancerous lumps defying gravity but by not immediately dropping through the floor only because of anime physics. They were probably pretty close to double J cup or a GG cup due to there being no J in the Italian alphabet. But they felt a lot bigger than they looked, so Giorno used his stand to reinforce his spine so he wouldn't have to deal with crippling back pains in 10 years. He reached between his legs and rubbed his third brooch on the bare space between his balls and mentally envisioned the pictures of female anatomy in his biology textbook that he spent so long staring at when the teachers weren't looking. Because of course Giorno wasn't gay, just fabulous. And straight fags can't get off to some cute trap boy in a miniskirt with a big dick and bigger milk melons. He had to have the full female kit and caboodle, or his nut shack wouldn't become a nut splat. Giorno returned his attention to his drooling dong, dirtily dampening it with dick dew while his new watermelon-sized prick slit and boobospheres shivered under the cool air. There were several types of ways to fap, but Giovanna Don fucked up was very uncreative and tended to stick to the traditional methods of touching himself. He was a missionary masturbator, and while he didn't go to church, he had friends who did and taught him the proper and right way that God intended boys to masturbate, and that was lying on his back, biting his lip to muffle the moans so his grandparents a room over wouldn't hear them, and call the cops, and using his writing hand to wring out his willy. But really, you've all read fanfiction before, you know the drill. When you've read one masturbation scene, you pretty much read them all, so let's just skip the smut and get back to that thick and juicy plot. Giorno's first orgasm was amazing. His penis completely exploded, and the puss beneath it pulsed and expanded like some kind of fish consuming its prey, sucking up all that semen like a black hole, vacuuming up the concept of existence into a great bleak void. It's important to note that when designing his female expansion pack, Gio wasn't familiar with how vaginas worked or worked in reality. He was only familiar with the sketched and censored diagrams in his textbooks where the vagina was like some tornado sweeping up the sperm and spitting it out elsewhere. He had also learned was the womb above the vagina if the coitus was properly executed. With this logic, his little fuck funnel had to be pretty good at consuming cum, and so his vagina slurped up semen like no other vagina on the planet. But Giorno didn't stop there. He could have stopped. He should have stopped. But he didn't. Back in health class, when the teachers preached about STDs and cautionary sex, they insisted on condoms. After they stopped showing deformed images of female genitals, Giorno Giovanna blocked the lesson out and resumed looking at the hot, naked female skeletons in his book and hiding his boner. He was not wearing a condom when he masturbated that fateful day, and his failure to wear adequate protection consequently added him to the 2002 teen pregnancy statistic. The freaking end.